So, some people ask me, they say, Mickey, what do you do for fun? They're right over there. Come on, we can get them. Welcome to Mickey's Corner. Today we're talking firearms. The history of firearms from World War II, early World War II firearms. I'm pretty excited about this one, guys. I'm gonna go through these each at a time, kind of talk about them a little bit, the history of them, and a little bit of theory, a little bit of philosophy. You know, we're just gonna dive right in. Let's go. So what we have in the front is an M1 Carbine. What we have in the middle is a British Mark III. And what we have in the rear is a German K98. So, and we cannot forget about our little buddy. This is a Springfield 1911. This particular model is actually considered the officer's model. It's got a shorter barrel. It's not your standard issue. It's like an officer's model, but it'll suffice, right, for eye candy. So let's just dive right in. Okay, starting right in the front, we have the M1 Carbine. This gun, this particular model, this is an IBM Built M1 Carbine, built somewhere around 1942-ish. This one has, it's been a little bit retrofitted for, you know, the barrel. I believe that this was used in Korea. I believe this one was issued in World War II, made its way into Korea, and then there was a big refurb. If anybody's aware of the history of firearms, the United States did a lot of refurbishing near the close, like 3/4 of the way through the war. So this one has a newer barrel with a bayonet lug. So it's not a bad deal. I love shooting it. This is a great rifle. The center rifle, the British Mark III, this particular rifle came out of India, which you gotta love the British Empire, and they were everywhere. So this guy was made in India. It's not an actual British-made Mark III, but this is chambered in .303. That's a battle rifle. And this is the German K98. This particular version of it came out of Berlin in 1940. This was made in the factories of Berlin. This is an actual Mauser built firearm. This particular one was a vet bringback. It's really cool. I love this guy. So for the astute, you will notice there is no hood. So normally infantry issued K98s had a hood over the front sight. Don't let that throw you. I looked it up, right? I was like, what? And then I was like, what? Because there's a mark right here. There's a mark on the buttstock that clearly designates this as a Kriegsmarine model. So this was issued to the Marines. This particular rifle was captured in Netherlands and brought back. And a little, if you're in the market for the K98 Mausers, okay? A little lesson I learned. This particular rifle, when it was captured, it was not duffel cut, which I think is really cool, right? No importation marks of any kind on this guy. And a little history behind the duffel cut, just so that you're familiar with it if you're in the market for older, especially World War II era Mausers. So after the war was over in Europe, a lot of warehouses full of K98s, soldiers go in, they're grabbing them by the handful, right? Well, they were issued a duffel bag, and the rifle, once disassembled, would not fit into the duffel bag. So what they would do is remove the action from the stock and cut right here, because this bottom section of wood is longer, right? So that it wouldn't fit. So they had to cut this to make it fit in the duffel bags. And this one wasn't which is really cool to me. I like it. Okay, starting in the front with the M1 Carbine. This guy, starting about 1938, the U.S. military decided they needed something that was gonna kind of go with the guys in the rear with the gear. They had support troops, they had police, military police, technical guys, and they were like, man, we can't just issue these guys a sidearm, right? Because that's what they were doing. They were issuing them 38 revolvers and 1911s. And they decided, well, we don't really want to issue them a full-length battle rifle, so we need to come up with something. And this was very early in the war, and the submachine gun really wasn't prolific. Like it just didn't really fit what they needed. Sure, there was the Thompson. The Thompson was available. Thompson's also very heavy, 45 ACP. And I guess their thinking at the time was they wanted something that wasn't a pistol caliber, that was still lightweight and mobile. So they put out a call to put out a carbine-sized rifle. So in 1938, they called for the carbines. They wanted to do something more than a pistol caliber. So finally, in October of 1941, they finally came out with a standardized version called the M1 Carbine. It shoots a 30 carbine cartridge, which is basically a Magnum handgun cartridge. If you've ever seen a 30 carbine, it looks like almost like a 357, right? A little bit bigger. And it was such a successful rifle that they decided they were going to start issuing this. As a matter of fact, this rifle was issued airborne. This was the airborne rifle right here. This is specifically what they requested. And a ton of these were used throughout Europe. Easy Company, 501st, right, man? Really cool stuff. Go watch Band of Brothers. It's awesome stuff. So with the M1 Carbine, this was issued all the way through until Vietnam. So even today, there are many countries that still have these issued. Italy, Israel, South Korea, the Philippines, Indonesia, still issuing these. That's crazy, right? That's how successful that platform is. Another cool fact about the M1 Carbine, this was in a different version, the M3, same platform, the very first night vision rifle issued by the United States. I didn't even know that until I looked it up. I thought that was super cool. It had a big, huge scope on it though. It was crazy looking. And it had a big, giant light attached to the bottom of it. It looked real funky. First night vision though. I know the Germans may have beat us a little bit there. It's kind of a close call because they had the Vampire. So I think it's cool. Modern technology in an old-fashioned war. So that's the M1 Carbine. A little bit of pop culture on that one is, two people have used this throughout history that are famous. Patty Hearst, which you need to Google it. Go ask your grandfather. Patty Hearst, very famous bank robbery. There's a whole backstory, brainwashing, and all kinds of craziness. The second person to use this rifle that's famous in civilian worlds, a leader of the black community, Malcolm X, used that rifle to defend his home when he came back from Mecca and there was a lot of social unrest, and he knew that he was having a lot of issues in his neighborhood and his community. He felt very threatened. He chose the M1 Carbine. That tells you a lot in self-defense, how valuable that rifle is. Maximum range, 300 yards. You know, it does the job. Let's take a look at this. British Mark III. Now, I don't have an M1 Garand here, but this is an Allied equivalent. So the British Mark III, it has a 303 British cartridge, bolt action, pretty simple. It has something really cool that most people don't realize. It has a detachable magazine. So Really cool for bolt action rifles of that day. These were issued by the millions, the British Empire at its finest. Africa, India, Australia, right up through Dunkirk, the British invasion of Europe with the Americans. The 303 was there. It saw action all over the world. It's a pretty powerful weapon. The 303, very, very powerful rifle, very powerful round. This is a 1,000-yard gun. I think it will do it. Now, there is a warning on these. Anyone in the market, okay? These rifles, you need to inspect them carefully. You don't want one of these blowing up in your face. So these have one major issue in that the 303 British was known to be corrosive. So what do you mean when I say corrosive? What do I mean when I say corrosive? Your chamber where your bullet sits over time, every time you pull the trigger and fire off a round, that gases that's vented out, that propels that bullet down the barrel, it's going to corrode that chamber. And over time, you'll get pitting in there, and it will start to expand out. And pretty soon, you'll start getting gassing out of the back of your action here. And it will become dangerous. You need to start looking at the possibility of your lugs where they meet your chamber wearing out and not having a nice tight seal. So that's just something you need to consider when you're looking into the 303 British. It's a safety concern. Great rifle though. Man, take it out. Okay, moving back, now we're gonna start looking more into the philosophy of the Germans. All right, so one thing you're gonna notice here, this is also a bolt action rifle. This is the K98. This is Mauser at its finest right here. It has a very sought after action that is still used today in modern bolt action rifles for hunting. It's super easy to use. One lever, you flip the switch, one lever, bolts in hand. You have a nice line of sight right down your barrel. Super easy to clean, super easy to maintain. It has a 5-round integrated magazine. That's the one downside to this, right? So it is what it is. It's still a fantastic rifle, even with 5 rounds. 8mm, it's a monster. This is a 1,000-yard gun. Safety, right there, you can't miss it. Easy, very firm. You know what you have in your hand. With the Mauser, great rifle. The Mauser's a great rifle. You can't say enough about these. These were issued by the millions. And something I wanted to cover with this, though, is I wanted to take a moment to talk about the leap in technology. These rifles all came out between 1938 and 1941. By the end of 1945, these were obsolete. Is that picking that up? Kriegsmarine, right? It doesn't have the front hood. It has not been duffel cut, which is really cool. If you're in the market for one of these, take the time to look up the duffel cuts. It has to do with your front stock right here. This one does not have importation marks. This is a vet bring back. So just to go into the philosophy for a moment on firearms technologies of early World War II, and you'll notice a trend in that most of these are bolt action. Even the United States had the 1903 issued during World War II. And that quickly transitioned into the M1 Garand, which patent labeled as the greatest battle rifle ever made. And I completely understand why. 8-round magazine, semi-automatic. It was fed with a clip. So for all you guys out there that hold your gun sideways, you're gangsta, okay, that's a magazine. Just so we know what we're talking about, that's a magazine, not a clip. I'm sorry, I hate to break your heart like that, but it is what it is. So the M1 Garand had an 8-round clip that you would shove in the top of it, rack the slide, go to firing away, semi-automatic. That was a big improvement over these bolt-action rifles. And look at the time frame, 1938 to 1945. We go from basically Civil War technology and a little bit after to what did we see come out of World War II? Man, we saw some greatness. We saw the STG-44 come out of World War II. That is the first assault rifle ever made. And it changed the course of history. And very quickly after that, right after the Germans surrendered, here come the Americans, here come the Russians, they're grabbing scientists, they're pulling them back into their countries. And 2 years later, the AK-47 is invented. The Kalashnikov, 1947. And if you look at that rifle and compare it to the STG-44, there are a lot of similarities. Maybe someone borrowed some ideas. I'm just saying, you know, it's a possibility. And what's ironic about that is coming out of the era of old-fashioned warfare, bolt-action rifles, man against man, it very quickly transitioned after the war into a completely different battlefield. By 1947, the Russians had the AK-47. By about 1955, the Americans had the M14, which is still a battle rifle. That was the philosophy they wanted to stay with. But there were a lot of options at that time. They just chose to stick with a known platform. But you notice that only lasted, what, 10 years? By the onset of Vietnam, the M14 was going out very quickly, and the introduction of the M16. Which, if you think about in time, that was 20 years after World War II. The Germans had the STG-44. It was there. They had the FG-42. It was in the hands of the troops. And it revolutionized warfare. Just be glad that the Allies really drove home, because, man, we'd be speaking German right now if they didn't just go for it and drive them Germans right back into their country. Because, man, they had some great technology. But I just wanted to kind of cover a little bit of history, and we can't forget about baby brother over here. One last little trip down memory lane. The baby brother of them all, the 1911. This shoots a 45 ACP. It's a very standard 1911. It has a hammer. It has a trigger. It's got the safety in the back so you can't accidentally misfire it. It's got a safety on the side. This was issued by the millions to our troops all the way up until the 80s. This was standard issue until the Beretta came out for a lot of troops out there, a lot of troops. Millions of those made, millions of these made, millions of these made, and probably 3 million of these made in that whole course of time. Anyways, I thought I would just go through some of this and kind of talk about it a little bit. Little trip down memory lane and kind of explore a little bit of our history. And I really recommend, guys, in this modern world we live in, where everybody has AR-15s, everybody has access to 9mm, 20 round, 30 round, 40 round, beta mags, and you can just go to the range and just light it up like a bonfire. Take the time. Go in your granddad's garage, in his closet, find one of these old bolt-action rifles. You'll thank me later for this. Take this bad boy down to the range. Fire off a few rounds and begin to appreciate the technology that went into these. These are iron sights, baby. Try to hit a target at 200 yards with iron sights. Believe me, I've done it. You can hardly even see a man-sized target at 200 yards. It looks like a tiny little, it looks like Baby Yoda out there. It's crazy. Check it out though. Man, you'll love it. Anyways, don't forget, guys, like and subscribe. Go into the comments, have a blast, right? Just any ideas you come up with in the future, throw it in there. Man, I'm crazy like that. I'll make any video I can legally make. Let's keep it clean, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate your time, everybody. It's been fun going down memory lane, and I really hope that I see you again soon. Hey, thanks everybody for coming by. Man, like and subscribe, please, so I can keep making more content. Watch the video. Man, don't forget to watch the video. Check out some of the stuff I've worked on.